Hi, I'm Michael Gougis. I'm with Roadracing World Magazine, and I am here with Kevin Schwantz, 1993 500cc Grand Prix world champion, Grand Prix legend, and we're talking to him just because he's Kevin Schwantz. So it's really cool to get to see you today. Good morning,
Thanks,
Kevin.
great to see you.
I'm very happy to be here. So we're sitting here chatting because MotoGP has been on an extended break. And it looks like there's signs of life. Looks like we're going racing again in mid-July with any luck. And obviously that was your life for a very long time. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like to have those periods of time off, extended periods of time off, and then have to get back on a 500cc Grand Prix bike and get into somebody's slipstream and touch 200 miles an hour again all of a sudden. So that's where we're going to start. Kevin, what was the longest break that you had from riding? I think we were just mentioning that.
You know, as I began my Grand Prix career in '88 full time, I hit the ground quite a bit, and I have suffered a few, not too complicated of injuries. But I was always a firm believer on as soon as I could get back on the bike, the better, because the longer I waited, the longer it was going to take, and mainly just to get your head back used to going 200, almost 200 miles an hour. If you set off for a week, it was tough. 2 weeks made it even more difficult. And if you took the third week or possibly even a month off, it was like having to learn how to ride a motorcycle again, getting back on that thing. So I was always, get me back on the bike, Dr. Costa, as soon as I can. I'll ride myself back to fitness, but it's going to take longer to get this back going than it is to recover from the injury.
And that was one of my questions. You keep pointing here. What part gets rustiest? Is it the muscles? Is it the physical capabilities? Can you train through that? Or is it the head, the mindset?
For me, it was always the mindset. You could physically, you could find a way to ride around, maybe having an injured wrist or an injured foot or something like that. Mm-hmm. But trying to get your mind back up to speed after taking that time off. At the end of '94, late in the season in '94, I suffered an injury at Laguna Seca and took about 4 months off. Mm-hmm. From that until I got back on the bike and started testing for the '95 season. Remembering it as every lap was like I was trying to go faster and faster, and it was just getting harder and harder because I'd been off the bike so long, and I was looking at my teammates doing the times they were doing. I had a couple of fairly big crashes that were kind of, wow, hold on, maybe I'll never be able to come back from this. And in the end, I didn't. I rode 3 Grand Prix at the start of the '95 season and quit after that because I was definitely concerned for just my health. I was like, this is not fun. I'm looking at all the things that I could slide into if I were to crash. The Japanese Grand Prix in the rain, I rode around on pins and needles, finished 6th, I think, and a couple guys fell off, or I'd have been further back than that.
I think that touches on one of the ideas that I had mentioned. It's not just the mental, like, what do I do going into this corner, but all of a sudden your mindset expands, and that stuff you could ignore before, suddenly you're aware of it. You start thinking about things that you didn't think about before you had that long break. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You start seeing things as you're trying to get to that comfort level and that focus that you need to be hauling the mail down this straightaway at close to 200 miles an hour, knock it back 2 gears and flick it off into this right-hander, next to wide open throttle with barely using any rear brake at all, really any front brake at all. You've got to be 100% comfortable and confident. And this, I keep pointing at this because this is where it all comes from. And once you can get that used to going that speed again, then you start to trust your skill set again as well.
What was I going to say? When you come back, is it harder to get back? Are you more focused? Let me rephrase that. Are you more focused on the mechanics of riding, or are you also fully aware that you've got not only your teammate that you're competing with, but now there's people from other teams and they're back at the track, and you're looking at other riders. So you're more thinking about the mechanics of how to get this thing around the track, or are you more thinking about how do I beat this other guy?
I think the mechanics are always something that just are second nature. I think
Okay.
that's something that you get back on a bike. And that's what I have yet to understand about people that say, oh, I ride a street bike. I ride on the road. I ride my dirt bike. I shift one down, five up. But when I rode my Grand Prix bike, I had to shift one up, five down. It's like, hold on. That's one of the things that takes more away from my focus of what I'm trying to get done on the track. Yeah, I mean, the mechanics are always something that seem to come pretty easy because you've been riding a motorcycle since you were a really, really young kid, and you get on it and twist the throttle and shift the gears and
Right.
go as fast as you possibly can. But the real motivation comes from the speed that you're doing, the times that you're doing, and seeing that you might have a teammate that's a second or maybe two faster than you, and you get back in the box. You're like, man, I tell you what, but that was pretty much everything I had. I don't know where I'm going to find 2 seconds. And, that last second and a half to 2 seconds come really difficult. You can get up to speed really quick, but getting to race speed in that last couple of seconds, you find those half a tenth at a time.
There was, I think it was 2013 or 14. It was at Silverstone, and it was qualifying. There's this glorious video of Lorenzo coming into the pits, and somebody shows him a tablet, and it shows him Marquez's time, and the eye roll and the body language. It was like one of the announcers said, Jorge knew how far he had hung it out on that lap, and it still wasn't good enough. And
it wasn't even close. Yeah.
Oh,
that's demoralizing that those times are.
Yeah, definitely. So when they come back, do you see anything different in the pecking order? Anything unusual? Is just everybody going to be just about the same amount of rusty?
I think everybody should be about the same amount, but I did see the other day that KTM, some of the teams that weren't in the top 10 in points are allowed to do some testing.
Mm-hmm.
That could make all the difference in the world because the KTM is not a long way off right now. I mean, it's not very far away from being a real competitive motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
You put a rider on it that's been riding it for the past 2 or 3 weeks, and he's got that much more seat time than the guys that are just going to have to get on and go to Jerez and try and practice and qualify. I think, and especially a place like Jerez. I mean, it's one of the places that the KTM works the best. It's not a big, long straightaway, a lot of real technical stuff there. So we may see some surprises early on until the teams that hadn't been able to go do testing get some seat time and riders get more confident. But I think in the end, you're still going to see the cream rise to the top.
Yeah. What do you think about Suzuki's prospects for this year? How are they looking in your opinion?
I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the testing that they did. Mm-hmm. I was thinking, I'll just worry about it gets closer to race time. But then, of course, now all this happens. I was doing a piece with Renz the other day, and mm-hmm. somebody asked the question and said that he and Juan had both been in the top 5 pretty steady in both places that they tested in Qatar and in, was it Qatar? Anyway, the 2 tracks they tested at, I don't remember exactly where they were, but both bikes were in the top 5 pretty consistently. So, comes race time, Marquez is coming back from a bit of an injury, see if he can get his confidence back. I mean, it could be something so simple as the surgery that he had and trying to rebound from that it just slows him down that little bit.
Just that little bit.
And now it's a handful of 6 or 8 guys could win a race, whereas everybody's got to just hope that maybe something happens to him, or you've got to really have an exceptional day to be able to run with him. So it should be interesting.
Yeah, the bike, just from what I saw in off-season testing, it's been steadily improving. The Suzuki's been steadily improving, and it didn't look like there were any weak areas in testing. It's not like it was like a bullet on the straight and then a handful in the corners or something like that. You rode Suzuki Grand Prix bikes your entire career. Characteristically, some factories have personalities, if you will. Yamaha, always really good handling. Honda's always like, we have to be faster than everybody else. Where was Suzuki on that spectrum? Were they more handling? Were they horsepower, or was it some combination where they lacked both?
I always felt like the Suzuki handled pretty good. You may watch some old videos and not think the same, but it seemed like it turned, it stopped, it did the basics really well. What it didn't do great it didn't want to turn back on itself. You had a 180-degree corner, a big, long corner that you had to be on the side for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think, the Suzuki always struggled there. In on the brakes, turn, quick little 90-degree corner, quick little 45-degree turn, whatever it might be. It did that really well. Change of direction, great. But it did really struggle on the big, long corners where you really had to keep the thing on its side for a long time.
Interesting.
Speed-wise, because that long corner that probably leads onto the straightaway, it always seemed like it struggled up top.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was a more general type of corner going onto the straightaway, we could get there. The speed on the Suzuki was always pretty good. One bike that I rode, our 89 bike, we had legs on just about everything. Maybe not the Honda just outright, but we had a bike that handled. We had great top speed, and we had the opportunity to win so many races in 89. And I crashed out of the lead of 3 races, and the bike broke out of either 2 or 3 that I was leading as well. So, plus we won 6 anyway. So 89 was a good bike. If it had a more experienced rider and possibly a little more development underneath its belt, that could have very, very easily been a championship winning bike.
You know, you mentioned something. We rarely see DNFs anymore. It's kind of interesting to watch Grand Prix and everybody finishes unless they hit the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
especially as electronically complicated as these things have gotten. Oh my gosh, how they manage to keep those things running for and especially limited engines, and you've got your sealed engines, and you can only use this many, and mileage. A mechanical failure is pretty uncommon these days.
It's pretty remarkable when you think about it that way. It really is, you know. You were mentioning watching some old videos, and during this break, I don't know how this came up on my YouTube feed, but the 1988 French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard came up. And it was funny because you said you watch some old videos, maybe it doesn't look like it handles so good. You hit a curb on the outside of, I think it's the last corner leading onto the front straight. And I thought, well, Kevin's going to hit the ground again. He got all out of shape.
Such a great story about the 88 French is I was Sunday morning warm-up. I was getting ready to go out. And I qualified everything I could do, every draft I could find down that big, long straightaway at Paul Ricard. And I was still, I think, over 2 seconds off in qualifying. Oof. Michelin came to me, our tire engineer came to us and said, hey, he goes, I have a tire. I only have one, and it's a used tire, but try it. And this is Sunday morning warm-up where you're kind of throwing the last things you got at it, and you're like, a used tire? Really? I got within a half a second of pole position on only thing we changed was this rear tire. We put it on, and I had a new one for the race. And what it did was it let me get onto the back straightaway better, had better drive, not sliding, killing speed, getting onto it. And I was able to get into the draft and stay closer to those guys who had probably 15 or 20 mile an hour on us at the end of the straightaway. And it was, it was a Sunday where you woke up and kind of thought, this Sunday's really going to suck. And to finish third and to see the Honda break and give us that podium position, because at that point I was trying to figure out who I was going to move out of the way to get onto the podium, because I was like, you know what, my bike works really good through the corners. Somebody's going to get nudged out of the way. And I looked pretty happy, like you said, afterwards. That race, I celebrated on my cool off lap like I had won the thing. It was almost a victory for us.
It was a lot of fun to watch. It's always fun to watch a racer who's realized they've accomplished something special and really celebrates it. Very cool.
I got another good story for you.
Yeah.
And that's 89 Jerez Grand Prix.
Okay.
That bike I spoke of that works so good.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just as radial front tires were coming into the mix, and Michelin had brought a bunch of radials, and guys, hey, this is the new go. This is what everybody's going to end up using. Mm-hmm. And I could not come to grips with it. And I chose a bias ply front. And my engineer told me, he says, Kevin, he says, the last 5 laps of this race, be careful, he says, because that front tire is going to be gone. 6 to go. I had a 5-second lead when I crossed the line. And I said, all I need is one more decent lap under my belt, because Lawson's never going to catch me a second lap. And I crashed on that lap. Around the old course, fast, right? Just bike off in the gravel, flung the fuel tank off of it. Couldn't no way I could get back on it.
Right.
But it was one of those things where those guys knew those tires so well. I mean, he told me, he said at 5 to go, it's going to be, well, it was junk at 6 to go. And actually with a smarter rider who possibly, and you know, I didn't think about it while the race was going on. I thought about it on my long walk back to the pits, kicking myself in the butt for doing what I had done. I thought, golly, JP told me that tire was going to be junk. He was right. Why didn't I listen? Why didn't I just back off a little bit? But yeah, it's amazing how the guys that build those tires, how well they know them, what they've done with in testing and leading up to the racing and stuff, and all the data that they get to be able to give you that kind of input.
It's actually, you know, it's funny that you say that. It's always one of the things that's really amazed me too, the tire engineers, because they are so specific and so capable of predicting exactly, you know, how a tire is going to behave over the course of a race. You know, you sit down. I've had the experience of talking to a few tire engineers in my career, and their body of knowledge, it's not just round and black stuff. They are they're high performance parts is what they are. You know, the tire is. It was interesting.
The one argument that I always liked that I heard people, oh well, I'm on Michelin's this year. I don't know. I like the Dunlops better. I can't figure these. Hold on, they're black and rubber and they're sticky, and you figure out just what you can get out of them, and then that's the limit.
Right.
Whatever
and
brand it was.
And if they behave differently, they behave differently. It's your job as a rider to figure out how to do it. You know, it is a race bike is just so many complex systems that and it's your job to figure out on Sunday afternoon how to make all those complex systems work better than everybody else's.
Get the most out of it, that's for sure.
You know, I just thought of something. How long did you go between the end of your Grand Prix career and your ride at Suzuka? Was that 2 years?
95, I did 3 Grand Prix.
Right.
The first year I rode Suzuka was either 13 or I think I did 13 and 14.
So that was 8 years of development.
Almost 20 years.
Okay. Oh my God. Right. Almost 20 years.
Yeah, 18 years.
So what was it like getting on a bike with full electronics and everything like that?
You know, I leading up to racing Suzuka the first year, I rode a bunch of local road races, CMRA stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I rode a 600, and I was like, that's all I just need. You know, I can do back-to-back stints in the heat in Texas in the middle of the summer on a 600. I'm good to go when I get on.
Good to go anywhere.
Good to go when I got on 1,000. Got on 1,000, and I had been wearing my heart rate monitor, motocross riding, mountain bike riding, racing, road racing, doing endurance stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd see 175, maybe 178 max heart rate, and typically that was top of a hill, really technical stuff on the mountain bike, or 20 minutes in on the motocross bike. And I wore the heart rate monitor the first practice at Suzuka. GSXR 1000 Team Kageyama bike, top of the back straightaway, 185. And hold on, there's nothing physical about it. It's just this. But once again, here we go. I was used to going 140, 145, not 185.
Yeah.
And those extra mile an hour were hard to tolerate. I mean, it took me practicing for a month leading up to the race on a big bike to where I was almost comfortable. The next year at Coda, MotoGP tested after the race, and I got to ride a GSXR 1000, kind of just a standard bike with slicks and brakes and an exhaust on it. Mm-hmm. And so I got to ride a big bike there. When I got to Suzuka and we did our first test, I did 209s, you know, like the 5th or 6th lap on the bike, which is where I struggled to get the year before in all my work. We ended up getting, I think, down into the mid 8s in qualifying, or 9 flat. But wow, having ridden a bike that goes that fast, getting there top of the back straightaway at Suzuka was like a piece of cake compared to being on a 600, thinking I was ready for anything. Yep, except those last 40 miles per hour.
The world changes at 200 miles an hour. You know, Kevin, I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you.
Thanks, Michael. Had a great time doing it.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
See you, buddy.